So, for our next installment of why interpersonal communication is important, we're focusing on the functions and characteristics of language. This goes along with the readings for, I think, chapters 7 and 8, verbal and nonverbal language, or 8 and 9. It's changed with additions over time. Either way, it's really important to differentiate between the functions of language, like what it does, and the characteristics, which are like defining properties. So a function means it's a specified action performed, so it's like what language can do. And then the characteristics is a distinguishing feature or quality, like I am a teacher, so one of my functions as a teacher is to grade papers. A characteristic would be, as a teacher, would be that you have to be empathetic and patient in order to be a teacher, right? So functions of my job versus a characteristic of my job. Just one example. I just want to let you guys know I'm also studying to be a linguist and take online classes in linguistics at Arizona State University, and I've always been fascinated by language. So I could really spend a whole semester talking about verbal and nonverbal language, but we only get, 15 minutes here. So I'm going to make the best of it. I just really am passionate about it because I think it's just amazing how much verbal language does in our lives. So, just a little sidebar about that. So, we know that language is symbolic, okay? This is one of the characteristics of language. And most of the principles of communication, principles of interpersonal communication from the first chapter, that first video presentation, the communications universal, those things also can fit along with the fact that language is symbolic, and actually all of the characteristics and functions of language can all be tied back to the symbolic nature of language. So like language being symbolic is huge. So what does it mean? Symbols are like words are symbols and they stand for other things, right? So the symbolic nature of words in this case means that these symbols are arbitrary, ambiguous, and abstract. All right, let's break those words down. So symbols being arbitrary means there is no natural connection between a symbol and what it represents at any given time. Okay, so I could draw a cat on the board. We don't have a whiteboard here, but if this was the classroom, I would draw a cat on the board and we'd be like, okay, that's a cat. Like it's not an actual cat, but that is a picto symbol of what a cat would be. And I could write the word cat and be like, okay, that's the word cat, just because we all agree as people that speak English. Like maybe we would call it gato in Spanish, or we would call it chat in French. So depending on what language you speak, the words are a little bit, it's arbitrary, but it makes sense when you're using that particular symbol system. So some characteristics of language or symbols being arbitrary. Language is flexible and evolves. Language is governed by rules, right? So as speakers of the same language, we have the rules for what symbols mean what things. These uses of words have changed over time. Think about slang, right? Most of the time it's arbitrary. I'm like, how does spilling the tea, how is that sharing gossip? But that's just kind of one of those things that people say. So it's arbitrary, but we all know what it means as those that share that language. Principle of communications dynamic, again, that goes along with language being flexible or evolving, and some functions. It helps us share meaning, and it shapes thought, and it affects naming, the arbitrary nature of language. Another principle of communication it relates back to is relaying content and relationship information. Again, if I said spill the tea to my mom, she'd be like, what? Do you need a rag to mop it up? Like, no, mom, I want a gossip, right? So it really just depends on who you're talking to and what you say to them. Because if they're just looking at the content, they'd be like, I don't know what this means. So moving on to ambiguous. Symbols are ambiguous. What's that mean? It's open to or having a range of meanings, right? With English especially, context is key. Using a word appropriately is key. Like I know I've been confused numerous times trying to get to the bottom of something, and it's really you have to like use communication to clarify communication. Meta communication, another one of those principles. So characteristics, this is related to language is flexible and evolves, right? We have different spellings of things that have changed over time to get us to our current spellings or usage of words. Language is cultural, absolutely. Depending on where you go, different words will mean different things. I can even think of like some when I moved to Virginia, someone was like, "Oh, bless their heart," and I was like, "Oh, that's so sweet to say." And then someone's like, "No, if someone says that, they're kind of calling you simple." I was like, "Oh, right, rude." So language is cultural. If you take it, that's very ambiguous to me. I would think that "bless her heart" means that you're being nice. So some functions of language that this relates back to is that language shapes thought and naming, right? We have to use symbols to name things, things being ambiguous. We can tie that back to language being cultural and shaping thought or naming with the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis or linguistic relativity or indeterminism. Those are all related to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. And that's talking about how do you talk about things that you don't have a name for? So think about trying to translate things into other languages. You never, some people just say, there's just not an expression for that in English, or oh, there's just not an expression for that in Spanish. This is kind of coming back to language being cultural. And like, how do we talk about it if we don't have a word for it? We can describe it, but we don't have a specific term to use to call it or a specific symbol for that phenomenon. I know that when I lived in India, I saw these big giant fruits growing on trees. I mean, they didn't even look like fruits. They're just like these big things that look like sponges. Okay, I've got some pictures here for it. Ooh, look at this. This thing is like weighing down this tree. And I was looking at it, I'm like, nothing like that grows in America, or not that I've ever seen. So I see these things. I mean, these things are massive. And people are like, it's a durian, because I'd heard of a durian and they knew that they were like stinky and weird. And I was like, is that a durian? People are like, no, it's a jackfruit. I'm like, a jackfruit? I just wouldn't have had a terminology for that. Also, I would have thought it would have been something more exotic, like like durian sounds kind of exotic, but jackfruit, like some guy named Jack found this and then they called it a jackfruit. Okay, it's actually very delicious. It's this big, huge thing. Look how big this thing. It's like cut in half, and it has all these great little pods in it, and you just buy it like that from the market, and it's super tasty. But per the principles of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, I just hadn't seen anything like that in my life. So here, coming back to our ambiguous word list and talking about how English is ambiguous, look at all these different words and their funky spellings. This is just what I made a tally for a week of all of the words that I could think about that seemed very ambiguous, especially when learning the English language. And you really have to rely on context. So context is key for a lot of verbal communication. Finally, another symbolic property of language is that it's abstract. What do we mean when we say language is abstract? Let me tell you. It exists in thought or as an idea, but not having a physical or concrete existence. Okay, so we have words for things that don't exist or that we can't prove, right? So think about the word love, right? Like you can't really like put your finger on love itself, but you can describe love. This also allows us to talk about things that are happening in the present outside of our realm of awareness. Like if language weren't abstract, we could only talk about the things that are happening right here in front of us. Like I could just be talking about my kitchen where I'm recording this. Whereas I can talk about a cat that's at my aunt's house across town, or I can talk about other things that are happening right now. Like you guys are watching this video right now. I can't see you. I hope you're watching it. You can talk about the past, you can talk about the future. All these things relate to language being symbolic and abstract. So this all relates back to these other characteristics, functions, and principles of communication. So I told you there was other functions and characteristics of language, and I pretty much have used them all throughout, but we didn't talk about performing speech acts, crafting conversations, or managing relationships. So speech acts are actions we perform with language, which leads to language crafting conversations or coming up with scripts. It's like when I meet you, I say, hi, how are you? And you say, oh, I'm good. How are you? And like, oh, what's your name? My name is so-and-so. That sort of thing. Like we have scripts for how we behave. When we meet people, we have scripts for all sorts of things. So that's kind of how we perform speech acts and craft conversations. But we also use verbal language to manage our relationships. And that is the most important function as it relates to interpersonal communication, because that is how meaning creation is possible, is through using verbal language in interpersonal encounters, right? It's like how we express ourselves and declare our feelings. It's how we connect ourselves. It's also how we detach ourselves. It's how we hurt people's feelings and do other things to communicate our needs. So very profound, very interesting. So little recap, these are our different characteristics. Language is symbolic, it's flexible, it evolves, it's cultural, it's governed by rules. And then the functions: shape thought, share meaning, perform speech act, craft conversations. We use it for naming, like the jackfruit example, and managing relationships. So nonverbal communication. So we've been talking mostly about verbal communication. Nonverbal communication has all of the same characteristics as verbal communication, except nonverbal communication is multi-channeled. Like verbal communication uses a single channel. Like when I stop talking, you can't hear me. But with nonverbal communication, you've got all those great 8 different nonverbal communication codes. Silence could speak a lot, right? Like it could be like my body language, I could be standoffish, I could be telling lots of different tales through my body language and how I'm standing, that sort of thing. But my mouth would be closed. So it's like you could be using eye contact at the same time that you're touching someone, using haptics and using proxemics, like how close or how far you're standing from someone. You can use multiple of those at once. So that's how it's multi-channeled. Nonverbal communication is more believable. If I'm talking to you and I'm like, hey guys, I'm great today, you're probably like, okay, she's doing great today. But if I'm like, hi, I'm great, you're gonna be like, whoa, that tone, your vocalics are very sassy. You're doing this crossed body language that's usually really standoffish, like just something tells me you're not great. So in general, nonverbal communication is more believable. And it's said that 93% of all communication in any encounter is nonverbal. So there's only 7% are those actual verbal words that you're saying. Nonverbal communication is more ambiguous because we don't have like it can be really hard to pick up on people's body language, right? Like, or sometimes you just have different symbols for stuff. I knew in India, like someone would do this and you'd see them on the side of the road and I'd be like, hi. And then I'm riding with someone else. They're like, no, that person's hitchhiking. They're like asking for a lift, like up. I'm like, oh yeah, we do that different here, right? So very ambiguous, and there's not, and this leads me to my next point, is that there's fewer rules. So it's not like we have a dictionary that we can go look up nonverbal communication definitions about. So nonverbal shares all of the same properties, but it's also important to note that it does have a few key differences. So hopefully this clarifies a little bit about verbal and nonverbal communication and how you use it in your relationships to build your relationships and maintain them.